It's kind of the worst case scenario for a studio. You've sunk millions into a movie, but for some insurmountable reason, the project needs to be shelved. Even a box office flop can make some money back, or audiences might learn to appreciate it over time. But if the movie never even gets released, that's a real nightmare. Let's look at 10 of those nightmares and see if we can work out what the heck happened. The most notorious recent example is Batgirl. Starring Leslie Grace, Brendan Fraser, and the legendary Batman himself, Michael Keaton, the movie cost between $90 and $100 million. And even though it was pretty much complete, Warner Bros. Discovery canceled its release anyway, blaming disappointing test screenings. There's probably a lot of behind-the-scenes shenanigans that will come to light in the future surrounding this mess. But to not even dump the movie on streaming? Warner Bros. Discovery must have really hated it. Netflix had big plans for its new live-action Masters of the Universe movie, the first since the notorious 80s adaptation starring Dolph Lundgren, Monica from Friends, and Tom Paris from Star Trek Voyager. Seriously, look it up. The streaming giant teamed up with Sony to develop the project in 2022, bringing on one of the writers of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse to write the script. But after sinking an estimated $30 million into production, the project fizzled out, and Mattel are reportedly looking for a new backer for the movie. Those of you who watched The Flash recently might have been like, hey, what the heck was Nicolas Cage doing there dressed as Superman? Well, back in the late 90s, Tim Burton was supposed to direct a movie called Superman Lives, starring Cage as the last son of Krypton. The movie was well into production, with multiple script rewrites, costume fittings, and even some early marketing. But a frustrated Tim Burton left the project to make Sleepy Hollow, and by 2002, the movie was finally shelved. And it only cost Warner Bros. $30 million. Oh well, at least The Flash got a confusing cameo out of it. Alejandro Jodorowsky's Dune is a canceled movie so infamous that they made a whole other movie about it. Jodorowsky's Dune, a feature-length documentary telling the story of one of cinema's greatest what-ifs. The Chilean-French experimental filmmaker tried to adapt Frank Herbert's sci-fi bestseller Dune in the 1970s. The estimated budget, $15 million, was massive by the standards of the time, and Jodorowsky also agreed to pay Salvador Dali, yes, that Salvador Dali, $100,000 an hour to play the Emperor of Space. The director also assigned individual artists and bands to create distinctive visuals and music for every planet in the story. Oh, and the movie would have been 10 to 12 hours long. You can kind of see why it was never completed. Back in the 90s, legendary B-movie mastermind Roger Corman was tasked with making an adaptation of Marvel's Fantastic Four comic. The movie cost $1 million to make, but the head of Marvel Entertainment thought it was so bad that he actually paid off both Corman and the movie's producer so they wouldn't release it. And when you think about how bad some of the Fantastic Four adaptations have been over the years, that one must have really sucked. Temptation, a Broadway-inspired musical starring Zoe Saldana, did at least have a premiere. The movie, which cost $12 million to make, had been compared favorably to iconic musical Rent, and premiered at the 2004 New York Musical Festival. Unfortunately, the reaction was so negative that the movie never saw the light of day. Spring Break 83, a remake of 80s teen comedy Spring Break, is infamous for multiple reasons. It cost $18 million to make, a pretty big budget for a comedy like this, but its release was shut down by acting and technical unions. The reason? None of the actors or crew were paid, and we're talking about some notable actors here, including the likes of John Goodman and Joe Pantoliano. Bootleg copies of the movie exist, but because of its major legal issues, it's never been officially released, and that $18 million has gone up in smoke. Jerry Lewis, an American entertainment legend, took a major financial hit for the day the clown died. But he was also the writer, director, and star, so at least he only wasted his own money. The movie, an extremely dark comedy about a clown imprisoned in a concentration camp for making fun of Hitler, was supposed to come out in 1972, and Lewis spent $2 million of his own money making it. But the premise was understandably controversial, and the backlash was so strong that Lewis eventually decided not to release it. Director Tony Kaye has had a lot of bad luck with his movies. He disowned his debut, American History X, because of creative conflicts with star Ed Norton. And then his 2009 action thriller, Blackwater Transit, didn't come out at all. Set in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the movie starred Lawrence Fishburne and Carl Urban, and reportedly had die-hard vibes. It cost $23 million and was pretty much complete and ready for release. But due to complicated legal problems surrounding ownership of the movie's rights, it never surfaced. Let's go out with a bang, with a canceled movie that cost an insane $130 million. Starring Olga Kurylenko and directed by Michael French, Jonathan Lawrence, and Scott Miller, Empires of the Deep was a 3D fantasy action adventure that was supposed to release in 2011. It was pretty much completed, but production was troubled, with multiple director changes and expensive special effects that went way over budget. Eventually, due to financial and logistical issues, the producers realized that a release was impossible, leaving Empires of the Deep at the bottom of the metaphorical ocean. So that's 10 of my favorite expensive canceled movies. It's always sad when someone's creative project doesn't see the light of day. But at least you can keep telling people it would have been amazing and nobody can honestly contradict you. If a movie comes out and is terrible, that's that. But with unreleased movies, the dream never really dies. That's probably not much of a comfort to the filmmakers, but hey, it's all I got.